Rohan Chetri is a writer and translator. His latest book is Lost, Hurt, or in Transit Beautiful. That's out this year from Tupelo Press and HarperCollins. He's a PhD candidate at the University of Houston. He's a recipient of the 2021 Penheim Grant for Translation, and his poems have appeared most recently in the Paris Review and the New England Review. Please welcome Rohan Chetri.
Thank you so much for having me. I will get right to it. I'm going to read the first two poems from my forthcoming book, from the first section. So the first section is called Catabasis, and these poems sort of deal with town folklore, familial history, and the likes. And this may possibly not be suitable for children. The first one's called King's Feedery. After the rape and the bloodbath, the savage king and his men retired to a long shed built in an open field by a thin river fashioned for this lull in the pillaging, so the horses could rest. One by one they scrubbed blood off their fingers and faces and sat down to devour a feast of rice and goat served by the villagers. The legend remains only in the name of a lodge built in the same place, which from the Bengali means the king's feedery, where the king took his meal. We say death stays here when it visits someone in the family. The time it came for grandfather, it arrived late, not at the wolf's hour between midnight and first light, but late morning on the highway, siren blaring all the way to the nursing home. As if punishing us for what it botched, it hung around for a few months at the feedery, then came for my aunt. Young, suffering in a marriage, she was taken straight by her weak heart. I imagine them, father and daughter, sitting still across a table, sharing a meal of steaming boiled potatoes, and always in the afterlife, that vague dream of salt. Death takes in threes, they said. We feared it would come for one of us. In the trashed room, they found death's ledger full of illegible scrawls in a dark meter no one could understand. Grandmother's devastation circled complete. That year, a channel of clear water began thrumming beneath her skin. We heard it rumble whenever she opened her mouth to speak. When I think of love, I think of her weeping as I left, her swollen lip grazing the back of my hand through the car window, brief and bright, her long blurred life now summoned with death lurking at the borders again. Married at 13, adolescence lost weeping into a cauldron of chopped onions. She talks of the flimsy wooden hovel perched on 4 fraying stumps, and in her telling, it is always how she saw it first. Herself decked in gold, with that sinking dread, a preface. I think of love, and I think how when they lifted grandfather's bier, she called out to him crying, "My child, my God, my child." And this is the second poem in the book. It's called The Singing Bone. The shaman comes to the valley after midnight, circling our boarding house. Pinned to our small beds in terror, we listen to the clean music of bones. Later, through a rift in the curtain, we squint into the mist, but cannot see the past from a man blowing the trumpet of a suicide's hollow shin bone. 20 years will pass before I understand this music, robbed from a grave. Sleepless in the new world, listening to the laboring salt trucks make rounds on the frozen streets It will come back to me all at once. The echo chambers of the creaking bamboo grove where we smoked our first cigarette. The army of deaf and mute in the village who spoke only in obscene gestures. The lonely daughter from the herbarium who wrote letters to us in a hen's crawl. The old house now replaced by something modern, architecture standing in for a woman's death, her husband's slow breakdown course for months, the clocks telling him to jump off a cliff, the second marriage, hurried and mourning. The white seed of lunacy sleeps, then swells to its fate, but all our fears of summer snakes and rabid dogs, everything depended on them granting us safe passage through fields redolent with the smell of semen after a night of rain. Caught in the downpour, we stood under eaves of caves the wind churned, some vegetation pushed up lightless from the silver blue mud. We hollowed hovels out of lantana brambles where we spoke in the voices of already grown men. In winter, I traveled down as the coiling roads of the world grew dark. I held my insides bile-soaked where joy trembled, prospect of home washed in the retch of anxiety. My history of nausea in the cold half-light of childhood. Where did it come from? Mother? Or the long descent in the old manor of hell? The asphalt frozen, slippery all the way home. The shaman returns the next morning for alms, turmeric, rice, strip of black cloth, we circle him, the mystification undone in daylight. Just a man bruised from the cold with children starving somewhere in the mountains across the border. As we sit here, goading him to reveal to us the singing bone. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's have some virtual applause. We have handy buttons here on Zoom if you like to give the applause button, the heart button, whatever you like. That was lovely. So our next reader is Keegan Wheat. Keegan Wheat writes poetry focused on FTM identity and his congenital heart disease. His work appears in Glass Mountain, issue 24, Sink Hollow, issue 8, the Houston Review of Books, and Acentos Review, December 2020. He is the poetry editor of Defunct Magazine. Living in Houston, Texas, he enjoys collecting odd dinosaur facts and listening to way too many hours of podcasts. Please welcome Keegan Wheat.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. And I also want to say thank you to Public Poetry and all my fellow readers. I'm so excited to be here and to hear you all. And the open micers, I'm excited for them to share with us. So blanket trigger warning on my work, transphobia kind of stuff, and dysphoria. But otherwise, I think it's good for children. So I'm going to start with like a more upbeat poem. We congregate. Hill the shape of those massive slides at fairgrounds. Aiden in heels and mesh pushes my pace. The sun falling below horizon casts a magenta net hovering above our destination. I rest my head on CJ's new suit jacket. They've been holding my hand, explaining their day, finally getting a suit especially fitted for themselves. Their smile conveys their joy beyond the beauty of the suit. Chrissy stands leaned against a wooden post. She bragged about the suit earlier, but stands aside as CJ keeps talking through their smile. When X. Your eyes a deep muck brown with dark gray circling irises. Often I forget my name. As I meet the handshake, I worry genuinely. Called myself Alex, lied to anyone as I grinned with anxiety. It's reflexive when your legal name refuses to attach. I don't have a backstory down to give out to prove I am the one they constantly see. TSA. I get stopped every time I go through airport security. I'm a red flag. You and I don't go together, but stand in the monitor at the same time. They try to make sense of us in a moment that never quite works out. First, she checks your hands that are too small. She wants to know whether or not you have drugs. Really, she is just following procedure. When someone this ambiguous walks through the line, that person faces many steps. Is this your bag? An agent calls across the group of people to me, near another agent starting to pat me down. My bag with me in it makes someone else search me as they search you. It's awful to witness yourself get pat down. The agent searching you invites another woman to see oddity, to pat you down in a place I forget exists, but now exists in front of everyone. These women need you to go to a room off to the side because they don't feel comfortable with the body in front of them. I have never been such a problem to warrant being taken to this room. I didn't even know where this room was until now, until I had to walk into this frosted glass showcase with two strangers that thought my body wasn't the way it should have been. Lesson. No one questions butch lesbian walking Dyke March, but I stand just a little bit off this visible link connecting code, still not quite in line. Community of radical inclusion taught me what I have of queer knowledge, relenting care that comes through asking permissions to hug. I can't regrow those queer beginnings into FTM. Though I learned the language, still slip into soft butch accent, retaining a certain gait. This next poem is one of my dinosaur poems that's not actually about dinosaurs. So yeah, Therizinosaurus. I tried to quickly pass a fragile dead bird, but I realized this broken, discolored eye was a toy. I stopped, a sort of raptor adorned with feathers carved into the body, weathered, sandy, and brown to cartoon sludge gray. It felt like I summoned this wreck. I'd been thinking about my fading memory of dinosaurs, my fading desire to prove a boyhood by standards I disregard. This last one is weird. It's just a poem based off of the sound of another poem, so it's not the most logical of things. List his features repeating. Lend me a pack to steal the teeming of pleated flower skorts for self-faking coward, slip through Monday sunrise or concert seeking names when glasses sway neutral appearance, sweep evidence from her mind and protrusions of a certain pattern, my ruptured image at varied stages, the lift of minor to major key shift, flows slick slip through pinhole. Thanks.
Thank you. That was great. So our next featured poet is Marissa Ahmad Khan. There I go. Marissa Ahmad Khani. She is a Bay Area native and a poet. She holds an MA in English from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Her work has been published in Southern Indiana Review, the Minnesota Review, Radar Poetry, the West Review, and Poets.org. She received the Academy of American Poets Prize in 2015 and 2017. Currently, she's pursuing an MFA at the University of California, Irvine. Please welcome Marissa Ahmad Khani.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm so grateful to be reading alongside so many wonderful writers. I'm coming from California. I'm tuning in from California, so I'm a little bit behind time-wise than you guys, but really just excited to be here. So thank you. So this first poem that I'll be reading, I explore a lot about cultural identity in my writing. And yeah, this is just my ponderings on that. This is called Skins. Like the crisp snow underfoot, I am cold and full of want. To settle someplace warm, not warm like the homes I've known, but warm like my own blood. Blood I want to know, though I only know my father's voice in a language my tongue can't plead. A voice speaking ocean and snow, his mother in the Mediterranean, the pomegranate skins he left in the streets of Tehran. My eyes are green, upturned like my father's, my skin tan and freckled like Genoa and my mother, like Ellis Island. In my grandmother's childhood home, in a trunk under my mother's bed, my great-grandfather's yarmulke. I live between so many worlds, know only the sound of my father's language, each word heavy in my mouth, dark curls heavy in my eyes. So I also write a lot about mental health, mental illness, and just kind of the effects that it has on day-to-day life, but also relationships, how it kind of permeates everything. This is called Major Depressive Disorder Recurrent. It's driving through fog, it's ocean salt on skin, lungs underwater, ragged breath, the light when waking, the cold bathroom floor. It's medication, stomach turning, a body creaking, a hasty goodbye. It's avalanche, swollen eyes, sun hitting water, splitting lips, red with wine, a mouthful of blood, dirt under fingernails, stale air warm and thick, the sun in your eyes, erosion, the biting cold, suffocating, sharp teeth, a fast grip, everything slipping between my fingers. This is called Driving Up California. I fell asleep in the passenger seat with your hand in my hair. We eat olives by the lake shore as dragonflies skim the water's surface, their electric blue bodies cutting through the breeze. Lying on my back, I see our dark curls moving in the wind and telescope my hand around the sun. I want to remember moments like these, breathing the early summer air, no pit in my stomach, only the one now tucked away in the corner of my mouth, its flesh stripped away. I want to know the curve of your lip, to trace my tongue over the chip in your tooth. I pull my notebook from my bag as you wander off, and I think of the murky water, how we lose sight of ourselves through the scum. The dragonflies flit overhead. They know there's no safety in stagnation. The water laps toward me as I eat another olive, the salt ripe on my tongue. And then I just have one more for this round. No, that's it, sorry, for this round.
Thank you.
That's okay. That was great. And we'll see more of your work very soon. For now, though, we have our fourth featured poet. Roberto Tejada is the author of poetry collections that include Full Foreground, Exposition Park, Mirrors for Gold, and more work. He's an art historian who's published National Camera Photography and Mexico's Image Environment, a monograph on pioneering Chicana conceptual artist Celia Alvarez Munoz, and such catalog essays as Los Angeles Snapshots in Now Dig This, Art and Black Los Angeles 1960 through 1980. He's the Hugh Roy and Lily Krantz Cullen Distinguished Professor in Creative Writing and Art History at the University of Houston, and He just won a Guggenheim Award for Poetry. Please welcome Roberto Tejada.
Thank you, Leila, for that introduction. Thank you, Public Poetry, Fran, and to my fellow readers. It's really a joy to be reading today. I'll begin with a poem entitled American Household, written shortly after what seems like a century ago, but was January of 2016. American Household. Here, I'm untethered, or else this American household is. A shame for guest and resident alike, torn asunder. Immovable, unmoving, horizon line before it closes on the embankment, which is too a slowing thunder. Whether cash and cake were meant for us, the undeserving as a frenzy of thought, an amusement from the spoils of corporation able to outweigh the will unnerving all restraint from the madness or immodesty that coils each milligram back into the sky blue oxy addiction McKesson Cardinal Health and Amerisource Bergen manufactured for the painless end-to-end encryption's other plum for which we are to wait again our turn in line, and still the others keep cutting ahead of us here, the complected and other-tongued asylum-seeking assembly of the glad in ordinary deliverance from fear. First fuel in the plot that turns us into tyrants, unspeaking yet another dream, to make them do what in wakeful hour is lawless, for us depraved and still deprived of power. So many of these poems in a collection that will be coming out next year are about making music out of social madness. In that line, this is delayed or modified. Faculty of the animal inclined to action ever suspect or delayed. And then we modify the rule of law. Criminals encoding glossy accidents in the ether, all the granulated dashes lunge and promise elongation. Someone to justice attack and retreat. Someone awed by the acuity of mood. Attunement by degrees in proximity to a world where hope and worry tussle with such twin attention as time or trust, for what in punitive terms was my entanglement. I have now the method for loss in the Republic. Immeasurable word, it is all involving. In 1971, Amiri Baraka wrote a marvelous and powerful essay in which he talks about what he calls the counterform in the closed field of white definition, which in his mind is the difference between aesthetics and ethics. This is called Baraka Inscape. Not so for my Republic, nothing left of rule, nothing left of rule over the salvaged self by way of weapons to sing in sovereign song, no more composed and courage than most, no more than most myself save nothing is, befitting the field, with as many futile stockpiles of opinion, so moved to moving with derision, or memory's abortive little heap after what I did to injury. Room still cold with the stroke of it. Still wreckage a resource like flesh, imputing fingers or lips I made stiller, unavailing even to eager asymmetries of white, where I am when I refute in the kill zone. Altered of melodic lines, white, in August heaps disintegrated glass, volcanic at the skeleton edge of that pernicious, unfiltered little self, emphatic for Baraka's dusk, for Duncan's throat, for an advent in mind for the kinfolk, meant by all in the derogative mob, in landlocked earth, in antipodes, in eyes wide, non-combatant number, in clay and kiln, in day and bone, in name, an eruption of a counterform, in the closed field of white definition. Wow. And I'll end with a poem entitled Beyond Reckoning. Admission here of my behavior to dissemble a story about the victors, my quarter moon and crossbar, my fact sheet glossy chevron. I'm enabled in place as I never meant for Hamburg or Brussels, never Athens, no matter how I obliterate my evolving thoughts concentric with the fragrances of clean and nearness to atrocity, a measurement of days and progress in terms I too obtain in amazement, sometimes far, sometimes so in the urban sequence, inalienable begotten ever of the million chemical components, the color asphalt, tawny, chlorophyll, grizzle. I confess, I suspect, I unfriend a shy electorate with something notable like evidence or argument, something noble for the influx of learning my lesson in connection to belief of what teacher tells me with no mind to erasing my purpose. Why forfeit the cruelty of forms? I accept, I concede, I allow, I discomfort, and are we now adjourned? Oh, hear ye therefore ghosts and guests in graphite, timely, untimely. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very transporting. We will get back to our featured readers now. First up, please welcome back Rohan Chetri.
I'm sorry, I had to run out to just close the door. But I will be reading from the third. I'll be finishing off with two poems. One is the last poem in the book, which I'll be reading last. And this poem is kind of a love poem from the errato section of the third section of my book. It's called New Delhi in Winter. Those mornings in the last days of December, as the smog deepened over the mausoleum and the ghost of the emperor's first wife lingered about the four gardens, weeping over her dead child, until a solitary jogger tore the curtain of fog with a flashlight, making her flee through a chink in the heavy lid of the small red tomb. I rose at dawn, my face with water cold as needles, and went to work, stomach taut as deer skin stretched over the seat of a chair. On the terrace garden above my office, I drank coffee and smoked a long cigarette as something unnameable loosened its grip on my neck. I remember thinking then, this cannot be the worst of my days. But mostly I remember myself in some variation of afraid. Why, I can't tell. I had a job, an apartment, and a woman who claimed to be in love with me less
We can't hear you. Rohan, we can't hear you.
then later led into a dim corridor to watch through a one-way mirror, the other, slipping on entrails, trying to clamber out of it. At the parties, I got drunk and cursed everyone. At home, I smoked anything the women from the university brought me. I wrote poems, then went on for years into my sleep. When we finally parted, the city shrank down to the few bars, her dentist, the hospital she drove me to where they treated the third-degree burns from the hot oil that jumped out of a pan one night to grab the back of my hand. The billboards outside the malls looked vulgar, like my scarred hand in the yellow light that fell on the pavement. But always that serious joy in the drunken body stammering home in the dark. In the daylight, I felt dizzy with fear of running into her. this vast city, open to invaders and vagrants for centuries, now small for two. A few things became clear to me then. The body itself has no use for hope. It hardens in grief to live beyond hope. And the only real use of narrative is to cheat that ancient urge inside us, pale animal with its face resembling the inside of our death masks, its long unheeded, persistent murmur, clearing into a deafening verdict, leave. This last poem is called Mezza Voce. All summer, the half voice lurked behind me, and I played deaf for days for to live, to not write about it, to use my body, part the river's flesh to operate. Machinery is human too, to love, and for once stay awake through it all. Now it comes like the deer sleeved out of the green in clean staccato, all corpuscle and hunger. No, not the deer. The ravens calling for the wolves to split open the light from the dead deer's belly, jeweled in the dark purse of its pelt. We are each given heaven for brief, so heavy, we put it down, dance small around it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was lovely. I love that line. This cannot be the worst of my days. I would like to welcome back featured poet Keegan Wheat.
Hey again. I just want to start by saying wow to the open mic. You all did amazing, shared amazing stuff. So thank you for that. This first poem is like a shout out / thank you to Lupe Mendez, because I did a workshop with him that ended up in this poem that I love. Fantasies of Immaculate Transformation. Bite of a dog's ear, teaching care for strength, microwave cup of tea brewing, learning you grew in teardown, excitedly climbing tree that's at highest 9 feet. The sky shifting to a static, aching green reflex, reheating tortillas as meditation, yellow hum of a candle placed at feet. Losing so badly you never relearn rules, plaster face with smooth beard, standing open, picking fleas off round new bellies under a small tree, tapping Gomal to check temperature, relearning the slippage of your name and realizing there is no new nickname for you. For being lived with. When he calls out Felicia, an old name, I'm pulled away from my body. I can only see the places that grew too much or not at all. When I hear Felicia, I hear him saying, we're a heterosexual couple, but still queer. I hear, of course, you're a lesbian. You and I sit in a creaky chair through a lecture on some ancient text. The lecturer gets worked up about the societal importance of naming a baby. He starts leaving off in the book. He claims that names make a person forgetting myocardium or atrium. We sit in this chair with your name our mom chose when she only saw you. This next poem is honestly one of my favorite poems of my own poetry, because it started out in a place where I didn't think I'd end with so much like hope for it. So yeah, working in transition. We stood on this rock floor surrounding a fire pit. He offered me some Wendy's fries. I asked him if he ever felt like nothing could push or pull him from his family. My mom still misgenders me, but she's my mom. I've been looking for this for years, for someone to confirm that you don't just leave familia, even when they don't see a piece of you. She still brags about me, still holds me. I see my grandma stutter through this foreign name, Keegan. She calls me Mija still, but mom corrects her, then Mijo. Mom suggests you'll be the one to abandon the family. I keep walking the empty sidewalk, light gray sparkled with glimmers of feldspar or chert or maybe ordinary quartz, anything catching my attention as she continues. I wouldn't be surprised, but I am still choosing them. When I, holding his hand, dangling from the top bunk, am on my way out to a dance with people carrying scars perpendicular to the one lining my chest. Obad at the fountain. Swell of the pinky you held, possibility of tingling numbness. I'd assumed the pink would shift the blue more, but it's still an untrustworthy blue. At this fountain, a positive haunting. I learn I am afraid of the sky, its irregularities. My body rejects the safety I pretend you bring. I'm gonna end on a lighter note with a poem that I wrote for and dedicate kind of to my friend who taught me about embodying like positive masculinity. And I just want to say again, thank you to all my fellow readers who have been amazing, and Public Poetry for having me, and the open micers. Trans Pup walks in crop top jersey and Nerf football. He makes himself laugh very loudly, giddy around his big, soft, cuddly family, offers cuddling like a glass of water. We need it more than we take it. He recognizes tears about to run and brings attention to your erasure. He bounds through reclaimed boyhood in every conceivable way, becoming any friends, your biggest fan, XOXO. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, XOXO. All right, let's welcome back Marissa.
Hi again. Yeah, like Keegan said, I'm just really grateful to be here and to be reading today. So thank you for having me. Really enjoyed all of the open mic readings. And yeah, thank you for letting me share a space with you. So this is called Plurality or On Human Complexities. Name me cataclysm, crushed flowers underfoot, the purpling of dusk. I am lightning in summer, yellowed hills ready to ignite, stiff legs, lakeside light, hovering mosquitoes. Gnarled roots, a flooded basement. I am my scarred left knee, pomegranate red, straining eyes, my mother's voice, the thickness of smoke. Call me humidity, joining hands, still water, smell of dirt, the lemon grove back home. I am supple pink, lisianthus opening, and petals soon brown and curled inward. Name me multitude, desert, the meeting of lips. I am the smell of lilac in the late afternoon, the warmth of sleep, the waking to an empty hand. So this poem is kind of just about living in California during the summer, and the constant threat of fire, which didn't used to really be a thing when I was growing up, but in more recent years, and particularly last year, was quite bad. So just my thoughts on that kind of constant threat and living with that. California summer. A sparrow flies toward the kitchen window as I wash last night's dishes and the water boils slowly on the stove. I think of the day ahead, rinse the soap from my hands and wait for the whistle of the kettle, only to startle at the thud of bird hitting glass. I will never understand the brightness of morning, a bird's body stiff on the ground, brown feathers iridescent in the light. Last week, I dreamt of fire lighting the hills like fatal marigolds, woke to sweat beating my sternum like pearls. Death feels near, a lightning strike, change of wind, a bird's mistaken flight. Kneeling down, I wait for a quiet breath, a cool relief before cradling my hands to carry it inside, nestling its body into a makeshift bed. This next one is very much a quarantine poem. I feel like when I look back at my writing, I'll very much be able to tell what I wrote during this crazy year. So this is called Still Life in Water. Last night I dreamt of flood, cold water pouring down the hall, soaking the carpets, running up my hair. In my sleep, I swim from room to room, skin brushed with liquid, fingers murky and wavering. I search the floating debris, lost buttons, old photos, an empty wine bottle left on the floor. From bedroom to kitchen, dried flowers rehydrate around me. A modern Ophelia, my black t-shirt billowing like a shroud. How can I move forward from these remnants, waterlogged and bloated from stillness? Last week, I went walking, felt the morning sun for the first time in months, gathered a makeshift bouquet to dry on my sill, rose hips, heather, a bundle of sage. I want to submerge and sink deeply, to come up for air, hair tangled and dripping. And this will be my last poem to kind of round out the reading. It's also kind of just a heritage poem. And again, thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful. Only half. Pomegranates are native to Iran, much like my father, who peeled them on our kitchen counter, liquid pooling, thinner than the blood red you'd expect. Much like my blood, half steeped in that same soil and somehow not thick enough. I run my fingers through my coarse hair, half curly, and I think about those pomegranate trees, how they dig those deep roots, how I half cling to those thin branches.
Beautiful. Thank you for all of that. All right, next up, let's welcome back featured poet Roberto.
Thank you. And I want to also add to the chorus of thanks to my fellow readers, Rohan, Keegan, Marissa, and really a joy to hear the open mic readers this afternoon. The next, I'll read 3 poems for, and I thought I might use an epigraph from the Rax Media Collective, the New Delhi-based collective of artists and writers. They state, so you could find your inner double by talking to your inner robot. Rax Media Collective. Witness. I was designed to describe or explain and to formulate a principle in practice. I was destined to be outside the audio coordinates, not apart from the sovereigns whom I convinced the science is sound, the medication approved, my plain song in the atrium. I strike you, so to speak, as venal in my great desperation, begun as an accidental engine when I was charged with so much malicious listening, enough as to move your village, your guild, or whether or not to agitate, if to admit an opening for popularity of the most popular item in multiples of the next most popular. I train the great invisible system to make of my voice a spell, but lacking an ability to scale magnified for audience in mellifluous delivery, the best competitor I split second back to my genius or to little margins of error. This is entitled Residence, a short poem. residence. From paralysis of sleep and lamentation, left shoulder, right arm, unable to discern which is which, and who the figure exacting to know why the heartbreak in hiding encasement of wax, a hovel, tiny aperture, viewfinder, they're here, the polyglots. I was very happy to have read the next piece as an overlay to the Houston-based, mood-driven post-punk band called Overo, whose band members include Brendan Stevens and his bandmates John, Lindsay, and Mercy. Lung compliance. If in my tangent I turned contagious some one of 11 exceptions, nominal as I am when lost now in the wave glide, in the rattle distraction, maybe the atmosphere, held in the hold, a feeling of elastic measure, I was pliant in the cellophane green grass corridor of sleep and departure proximate, but something conspired so that my destination was to the syndicate unseen as footsteps turned my knees now, obliged to repel the pavement, sound of sand in multiples of 3, accent of a heartbeat. Point was, I was given to demonstrate, unable, only known to my foreign burning, movement of muscle and bone, suddenly obvious, a steeple, a forest, prohibition, a star point. But so too, in the great monument, this vowel and sovereign name, name of estuary, name of hillside, name of battle cry, scene of the discarded, begone, beheld, before I was born. Citizen. Supremely alive to the letter, to the shifting temperature and attendance of breath, of ceremony, heartbeat, footstep, fugue state. Varieties of action attuned to the moment in profound, unruly blush for the private distortion of a sentence, safe kept now a middle distance between two verifiable fires in the axis of time, earth afloat in the foam of it, prospering host for lower vertebrates, undead slow, undead very fast for the sake of appetite, afterlife, alliance. And I'll end with this poem that gives title to the current book of poems that I'm writing, entitled Carbonate of Copper. In the hours I was left to the elements, sorely colorless labor, evolving facts of a day, days now deficient in matters of fact, so many attachments of the tribe to the stupefying circle, it burns a new image of the earth, disabling the view from nowhere. Am I unsheltered and so out of time as to wonder, does my face defy its aim on end? Am I the architect of this very small thing I derive or refuse from the 7 descendants? Does a landscape here obtain as when there was food, the field, abundant sun, summer green, river valley, chestnut, little balm, border, milestone? Came the builders of a sudden, identical twins at the sugar mill. It has a window overlooking the carbonate of copper on shapes predictive of the wireless ether. Thanks so much.